Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
On that note, John, on process and system, I guess I'd like to switch over to the agency side of things. We do have a lot of agencies in our audience. Yeah. And I think you actually asked this question, or a flavor of it, in the survey that you did with Databox and ActiveCampaign, which is, okay, let's say an agency buys into this concept of, hey, fractional CMO enables all these benefits for us as an agency business. How hard is it to execute on this? I think it's almost, at least speaking in my own experience as basically a solo consultant, sure, it's fairly easy for me to sort of position my own service offerings and my own deliverables as strategic. I feel like it's got to be a little harder for an agency to sort of pivot from, all right, now we're going to hire a bunch of people who are really good at actually going into Google Ads and setting up a campaign and looking at the analytics and all of that, to a more strategic way of thinking. What have you found with your own agency customers who subscribe to Duct Tape Marketing or the folks you surveyed? How hard is it for them to make that shift?
So I think it's hard for any business to pivot with their existing clientele, particularly because, to say, okay, we're doing all this execution for you, but wait, now we're going to do strategy as well. It's like, why weren't we doing that before? Or we don't think of you as that, right? We didn't hire you for that. So it's hard to pivot. Right. But what we have found a lot of folks doing is it becomes an add-on service. So as they go out and try to attract new clients, maybe a more ideal client base, because they're trying to shift their model, and it's probably going to attract a different kind of client. So it's a transition as well as really kind of a new model.
Mm-hmm. Let me follow up on that a little bit, because it's interesting. We talk about strategy versus tactics. You come into, or a hypothetical fractional CMO would come into an organization, let's say, that has an existing marketing plan. They're marketing, they're doing Google, they're doing Facebook, they may be doing email marketing and some other stuff. And you say, well, I'm going to deliver a strategy to you. They've got something going in process. What does that look like? I mean, do you completely reformulate what they're doing? Describe that a little bit, because that sort of illustrates the difference between strategy and tactics.
You bet. So I want to take exception to one of the things you said. They have a plan, but what you described is they're executing.
I use it
tactics,
loosely,
right?
I use the word plan loosely. They're doing something.
They're doing something. So this is, in my experience, been true with about 90% of the folks that we have worked with or encountered. They're marketing way too broadly from a target market standpoint. The top 20% of their customers should deserve a heck of a lot more love and attention and really innovation than they're giving them. Their messaging is usually still all about them and what they do, as opposed to the problem they solve for that ideal client. And they have really no thought out customer journey. It's, we run some ads to get people to buy. And a great deal of what we do is actually show them the entire behaviors, the 7 behaviors: know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, and refer. We call it the marketing hourglass. That really shows them kind of the proper place of marketing throughout the organization and throughout the entire customer journey, and how we actually could be charging a lot more money for what it is that you do, even in a commoditized industry, with the proper focus on the stages of the customer journey. The content is usually an afterthought, even though they know they need it. It is not a strategic component that it needs to be in their business. So we bring them a strategic editorial approach. And then we obviously go to work at maturing their marketing through stages. Because a lot of people, will bring in a marketing agency and say, we just want more leads. Well, there's a lot of foundational things that are broken. And spending more money on ad campaigns is really just going to make the brokenness amplified. And so, we really take an approach. And I think that this is a proper role for a CMO, is that we are going to move through stages and mature the marketing so that we don't just get there overnight. It's a process of building and accomplishing milestones in execution, and not just trying another tactic.
And how are you? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, particularly for clients who are buying marketing services as a means to an end, again, primarily for leads. How do you convince a client to kind of stick with you through that foundational stage, which I totally agree is essential? I mean, it harkens back a little bit to my local marketing stack that I put together several years ago. Like there's sort of crawl, walk, run phases of marketing, and even crawl, walk, run phases of tactics that you should be executing. But how do you get somebody to stick with you long enough where you have the foundation in place?
For us, I think that's really big. It may be just because if when somebody comes to us and they say, we want to hire you, you get to hire us to do strategy first. That's the first phase of the engagement. It's going to take about 45 days. It has a fixed price. It has a fixed deliverable. And what
so
we found is
that's one of the things I was curious about. If there was a defined,
So if they're not going to sit still for it, I mean, if they're in a hurry to fix something, they're just not going to be. So we're attracting the right client, I think, is the first thing. I will say that, and David, I know you've worked with businesses for years as well. They've never had strategy. Most of the folks we've worked with, I mean, it's been lip service, or somebody came in and did a half day with sticky notes, and then they went back to doing what they were doing. And so getting insight about the problem they really solve for their customer and what an actual customer journey looks like, we buy so much trust through that process that I think we are granted this 3 to 6 months of what's going to happen next, without everybody saying, okay, in the weekly meeting, what happened, what results occurred. And I think that to me is one of the greatest differentiators. In fact, in the survey that we did, we asked agencies, what's been the chief benefit of moving to this fractional CMO model. Number one was that it makes us more strategic as an agency. No surprise there. But a very close number two was it creates a better relationship with the clients that actually hire us. And I think that's huge. You go from vendor to trusted advisor, and that buys you a lot of time.
So I have just a question, a comment and a question again. I'm working with a client, and I was probably 6 or maybe 12 months in before it became obvious that their internal processes, both their phone systems either not working or not getting answered in a timely fashion. And then their time to quote is 5 days, right? As opposed to, a day or 2 days. And this is a lawyer who is looking at a specific type of client, and they should be able to say to that client, we will take you or we won't take you. As a case, it's taking them 5 days to get there. It's not an elaborate quote process. It's just assessing whether the client and the lawyer are a good match. And it took me probably 18 months to get to, as a fractional person, to understand what those were their bigger problems than anything I could do or didn't do on the lead side. And so the question is, that's a long comment, sorry. The question is, how does the fractional person learn about those process problems sooner?
Well, I'm going to go back to our customer journey again, because a lot of people talk about customer journey. They're really talking about a marketing funnel that ends, once somebody says yes or buys a product. For us, it certainly has to go into the sales experience, the customer experience, the retention, turning them into advocates. I mean, those are all part of marketing, and I think the fractional CMO's job is one of them that I think is sorely needed in most organizations. Is the fractional CMO, or the CMO in general, I think needs to be the advocate for the customer. So that we go in very early on in diagnosis phase and figure out what happens when a lead comes in. How does the sales handoff happen? What happens when customer service takes over the lead? Everything you talked about. I mean, it involves phone systems. I mean, it involves call tracking and recording and listening to responses as they come in. And from a practical standpoint, as a marketer, if you're not paying attention to that stuff, you're going to be charging a whole lot of money for what the client ultimately decides is not working. And it's your fault because the business isn't growing. Even if you're sitting there saying, well, but look, we're bringing you leads. So I've always felt from a practical standpoint, the way you stay hired and keep a client for years is to make sure that you're getting into their business of making a client happy as well.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.